This is a free course. No fluff, no nonsense. A direct and deep dive into the most powerful concepts of Carl Jung's psychology with a clear goal: to help you master your shadow and become emotionally unshakable. Who should watch until the end? Anyone facing anxiety, depression, feelings of guilt, anger, grief, or any type of psychological suffering. Those who already realize they are stuck repeating self-destructive behavior patterns. Those who feel that no matter how hard they try, they cannot achieve the emotional control they desire. Those who carry pains they cannot name, but that weigh on them every day. This content is for you. Throughout this video, you will clearly and practically understand what the shadow is. You will learn how it silently shapes your feelings, thoughts, and impulses. You will discover why so many of the emotions you cannot control. Outbursts of anger, anxiety attacks, unexplained sadness, chronic guilt do not arise from external situations, but from unresolved conflicts within you. And more importantly, you will learn how to face all of this not with superficial positive thinking techniques, but with a real, deep, and transformative method. A method based on over a century of depth psychology, teaching you to confront the most hidden parts of your psyche and integrate them. This is not a video for passive consumption. Pause when necessary. Take notes. Go back and watch again. Each concept presented here can change the way you understand yourself and how you deal with the world, but only if you apply it. It's not enough to just watch. It's personal work that requires courage. And yes, it will require discomfort. But on the other side of that discomfort is the emotional freedom you seek. You will learn why the repression of the shadow is at the root of many psychological disorders. How the persona, the mask you show to the world, contributes to your emotional fragility. How the archetypes of the collective unconscious manifest in your daily life, and how all this knowledge can be transformed into practical action. This is a complete course, a solid foundation for anyone wishing to start or deepen the process of individuation. The path that Jung described as the true purpose of human life, to become who you truly are. Now, if you really want to free yourself from the psychological suffering that accompanies you, if you want to be someone who can navigate the most difficult emotions without being destroyed by them, you are in the right place. But remember, only those who watch until the end and practice what is taught here will achieve real results. Let's get started. This is the name that Carl Gustav Jung gave to the set of everything you reject, repress, or simply refuse to acknowledge in yourself. And this is where we truly begin this course. Understanding what the shadow is and why it exerts such a devastating power over your emotional life. Imagine the following. Since childhood, you have been taught by your parents, by school, by society about what is acceptable and what is not. You were praised when you were nice, polite, obedient. You were criticized or punished when you showed anger, envy, selfishness, deep sadness, impulses considered ugly or wrong. And like every child, you quickly learned certain emotions and behaviors need to be hidden, pushed into a dark corner of your psyche. This is how the shadow is born. But what happens to everything that has been repressed? It does not disappear. On the contrary, it remains alive, growing in the unconscious, shaping your reactions, your thoughts, your feelings. The shadow is the sum of all these denied aspects of the personality. It is the dark side that you do not want to see, but that inevitably acts upon you. Anxiety, often an indirect manifestation of the shadow. Depression, a buildup of unprocessed emotions trapped in the darkness of the psyche. Explosive anger, the cry of repressed parts that can no longer be ignored. Self-sabotage, an internal attack from the shadow itself against the conscious goals of the ego. The shadow is not evil in itself. It contains aspects that could in fact be sources of strength and creativity if integrated in a healthy way. But as long as it is not recognized, the shadow will continue to operate autonomously. And that is why so many people live trapped in cycles of emotional suffering that they cannot explain. They feel overwhelmed by uncontrollable emotions, by self-destructive impulses, by patterns of behavior that repeat like an endless nightmare. And here is the truth that few have the courage to face. You are not just the image you have built of yourself. You are not just your good side, your light side. You are also what you fear most to admit. And the more you run from it, the weaker you become emotionally. Integrating the shadow is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. It is recognizing that anger, envy, fear, the desire for control, all of this is part of the human experience. And that only by bringing these aspects to consciousness can you prevent them from continuing to sabotage your life from the shadows. In the next few minutes, you will see even more clearly how the shadow is acting in your daily life, how it controls your emotions and reactions in ways you do not even perceive. If you think you are in control of your emotions, prepare for an uncomfortable revelation. In the next part, we will explore exactly how the shadow controls your emotions and your decisions, and why it is impossible to become emotionally unshakable while you do not understand this mechanism. Now that you understand what the shadow is, it's time to grasp how it impacts your life in a much more direct way than you might imagine, especially in your emotions and decisions. The shadow is not an abstract concept. It acts every day, shaping feelings, impulses, and choices. Jung explained, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the key to understanding why so many emotions seem to escape your control. You see, from a very early age, you were taught to repress certain feelings: anger, envy, fear, selfishness. You learned to hide impulses considered socially unacceptable. But what is repressed does not disappear. It remains alive, charged with emotional energy, acting autonomously through the shadow. When you feel an anxiety you cannot explain, you are often dealing with unrecognized shadow content. Similarly, disproportionate outbursts of anger, deep sadness without apparent cause, constant guilt, all of these are signs that the shadow is in control. In Psychology of the Unconscious, Jung warned, repressed contents do not cease to exist. They become autonomous forces that can invade and dominate consciousness at any moment. This explains why many emotional reactions seem to happen automatically. They are responses from unconscious complexes, fragments of the psyche that act under the command of the shadow. The decisions you make are also deeply influenced by this process. Repeating toxic patterns in relationships, sabotaging professional opportunities, adopting self-deprecating attitudes. All of this is fueled by shadow content that you have not integrated. As long as you believe you are in total control of your emotions and choices without first facing your shadow, you will be living an illusion. Your shadow does not disappear just because you ignore or rationalize your emotions. On the contrary, it strengthens in the darkness. But the good news is that there is a way out of this cycle, and it begins with awareness. Identifying the patterns of the shadow is the first step to regaining emotional control and truly becoming a resilient and whole person. However, there is a fundamental obstacle that prevents most people from starting this journey. The persona, your social mask built to please, to protect, to fit in, ends up reinforcing the dominance of the shadow. Now, pay close attention because this is important. If you've made it this far, you're probably asking yourself, how can I actually apply all of this in my life? Because knowing, just knowing, changes nothing. What transforms you is practice. And that's exactly why I created my new ebook, Dialogues with the Unconscious, a 30-day path to individuation. This is not an ebook to just read and forget. It's a 30-day practical guide with simple yet powerful daily exercises that you can do in just a few minutes each day. You don't need hours of free time. You just need daily commitment. Every exercise is designed to help you connect with your unconscious and start integrating your shadow in a consistent, practical way. And this ebook is the perfect complement for those who have read or will read Beyond the Shadow. If Beyond the Shadow is the map, Dialogues is the day-by-day path to help you apply this knowledge in real life. It's currently available with a 10% launch discount, but that won't last long. If you're truly committed to doing this work, don't put it off. Click the link in the pinned comment and get your copy right now. Start your practical journey of transformation today. To understand how the shadow maintains control over your life, it is essential to comprehend the role of the persona, the social mask you have built to survive and adapt to the world. Jung describes the persona as a system of adaptation or relationship with the external world. In other words, it is the image you present to be accepted, respected, or loved. It is not who you truly are, but who you have learned to appear to be. Since childhood, you notice that certain behaviors generate approval, while others lead to punishment or rejection. Naturally, you learn to emphasize the pleasing aspects and hide those that are not. Over time, this adaptation crystallizes. You wear the persona like armor, an idealized version of yourself that you carry into relationships, work, and social life. But here lies the problem. Everything you repress to maintain this mask ends up being pushed into the shadow. The more rigid and perfect the persona, the more psychic material accumulates in the darkness of the unconscious. Therefore, people who seem extremely controlled, always positive, and impeccable in public often struggle in secret with deep states of anxiety, depression, explosive anger, a suffocating sense of emptiness. The price of sustaining an idealized persona is extremely high. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung warns, the persona is a compromise with society, but also a self-deception, as it distances us from what we truly are. The more you believe you are your persona, the more disconnected you become from your authentic self, and the more vulnerable you are to the manipulations of the shadow. This internal conflict generates constant emotional fatigue. You expend energy trying to maintain an artificial image, while repressed aspects of the psyche demand attention. It is a game that cannot be won. The shadow will always find ways to manifest, whether through physical symptoms, emotional crises, or impulsive behaviors. The solution? Start dismantling that mask. Recognize that you are not the persona. You are a whole human being with lights and shadows. Integrating these aspects is the only way to achieve true emotional freedom. And the first step toward that is learning to identify the elements of your shadow. How does it manifest in your daily life? How can you begin to notice your hidden patterns? This is exactly what you will discover in the next part. Now that you understand how the shadow and the persona interact, it's time to take a crucial step, learning to recognize your shadow in everyday life. Jung made it clear that the shadow reveals itself whenever we are dominated by intense and irrational emotions. In Ion, he writes, the shadow appears in impulsive reactions, in lapses of behavior, in the projections we make onto others. In other words, you don't need to enter a cave to find the shadow. Just pay attention to your own daily reactions. Here are some practical examples. Example 1, projection. Imagine you feel a sudden and disproportionate hatred for someone at work. Something small, a comment, a gesture triggers a rage that you yourself consider exaggerated. This is a clear sign of projection. What you're hating in that other person is in fact a repressed aspect of yourself that you refuse to accept. Example 2, judgment. You disdainfully judge people who show emotional vulnerability, saying they are weak or dramatic. But if you look deeper, you might realize that you yourself have repressed your sensitivity for years out of fear of being seen as weak. What you condemn in others is what you cannot tolerate recognizing in yourself. Situations like envying someone's success, feeling excessive guilt for small mistakes, having outbursts of jealousy, chronic procrastination, avoiding important confrontations. All of these can be expressions of the shadow. Dreams as shadow indicators. In Man and His Symbols, Jung and his collaborators emphasize that dreams are one of the most direct ways to access shadow content. Recurring dreams with situations of loss of control, being chased, confrontations with shadowy figures, aggressive animals, usually indicate that repressed content is trying to emerge. Physical symptoms. Another indicator, pay attention to your body. Chronic tension, unexplained pain, constant fatigue. These symptoms often reflect the psychic energy blocked by the attempt to keep shadowy aspects out of consciousness. Therefore, the key to recognizing your shadow is honest self-observation. Ask yourself, what irrationally bothers me in others? What emotions dominate me against my will? What behaviors do I feel ashamed of after they happen? What parts of myself do I hide to maintain my social image? This work requires courage. It is not comfortable to admit that you have anger, envy, fear, or cruelty within you. But as long as you do not recognize these elements, you will continue to be controlled by them. However, identifying the shadow is just the beginning. The next step, and the most challenging, is to consciously confront it. And for that, it is essential to understand how the process of confronting the shadow works, which you will discover in the next part. Recognizing the shadow is an essential first step. But true transformation happens in the confrontation, and here Jung was categorical. There is no way to avoid this stage if you wish to become a whole individual. In The Undiscovered Self, he warns, individuation is not achieved by denying the shadow, but by confronting it with courage. But what does it mean in practice to confront the shadow? First, it is to accept that this process is uncomfortable and inevitable. You do not choose whether you will face the shadow. The only choice you have is whether you will do so consciously or continue to be manipulated by it. When you begin to bring these dark contents to light, intense emotional reactions arise: guilt, shame, fear, anger. Many give up here, retreating back into the persona. But it is precisely at this moment that the real work begins. Practical examples of confrontation. Example 1, confronting envy. You realize that you feel envy towards colleagues who achieve success. Your initial impulse is to deny or justify, "I don't care about that." But the true confrontation is to admit, without judgment, that envy is present. Asking yourself, where does it come from? What does it reveal about my own unacknowledged frustrations and desires? Example 2, confronting repressed anger. Imagine that you have chronic difficulty setting boundaries. In confronting the shadow, you realize that behind this pattern lies a deep fear of rejection and repressed anger for having been constantly disrespected in the past. Facing this anger, accepting it as legitimate, is part of the process. The phases of confrontation. During this confrontation, it is common to go through several phases. Denial. The impulse to rationalize or minimize the dark aspects. Resistance. Feelings of guilt or shame arise when admitting unacceptable parts of oneself. Acceptance. Conscious recognition of these aspects as legitimate parts of the psyche. Integration, gradual assimilation of these contents, reducing their autonomous power. Jung emphasized that this journey is not linear. In Ion, he describes the confrontation with the shadow as a continuous process of assimilation which accompanies the whole of life. There is no moment when you defeat the shadow. Rather, there is a constant commitment to dialogue and integration. Practical tools for this work: dream analysis, reflective writing, Jungian psychotherapy, deep meditation. Above all, the sincere willingness to look at oneself with brutal honesty. But be aware, during the confrontation, new psychic elements emerge. Deep archetypes residing in the collective unconscious begin to manifest, playing a crucial role in this process. In the next part, you will understand how the archetypes that emerge on this path, such as the anima, animus, self, and trickster, can both accelerate and hinder the integration of the shadow. As you progress in confronting your shadow, something inevitable happens. Deep archetypes from the collective unconscious begin to emerge and influence your process. Jung dedicated extensive studies to these universal patterns of behavior and symbolic imagery. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he states, archetypes are universal, inherited psychic systems that act as organizing structures of experience. During the confrontation with the shadow, 4 archetypes often manifest with particular strength: anima, animus, self, and trickster. Each plays a fundamental role, sometimes as a guide, other times as an obstacle. Let's analyze each one with practical examples. The anima and animus. The anima, the unconscious feminine aspect in men, and the animus, the unconscious masculine aspect in women, are intermediaries between the conscious and the unconscious. In the process of integrating the shadow, these archetypes frequently emerge in dreams, emotional projections, and relationships. Practical example. A man in the process of individuation begins to have recurring dreams with mysterious feminine figures, seductive, dangerous, or wise. These images represent the anima, inviting him to integrate repressed emotional aspects. The same occurs with women regarding the animus, which may appear in dominating or inspiring masculine figures. The self. The archetype of the self represents the psychic totality, the organizing center of the psyche that transcends the ego. When the self emerges, there is usually a strong impulse to integrate internal polarities. But the self also confronts you with everything that has been denied, demanding conscious balance. Practical example. After months of working with the shadow, you begin to feel a new sense of internal unity and coherence. However, this comes accompanied by deep existential crises, questions about purpose, values, and identity. This is the self in action, forcing an internal reorganization. The trickster. Perhaps the most treacherous of the archetypes in this process is the trickster, the archetype of deception, chaos, and rule-breaking. On the path of individuation, the trickster often emerges when you believe you have overcome aspects of the shadow. It tests your ego, creating emotional traps and illusions of superiority. Practical example. After a period of significant progress, You start to think of yourself as more awakened or aware than others, and ironically fall into a new form of self-deception. The trickster is at work, inflating the ego and obscuring the true inner work. In Aeon, Jung emphasizes that archetypes are not contents of consciousness, but factors that organize and structure the psyche. Recognizing their presence and role is crucial for navigating the individuation process with clarity. Integrating the shadow is neither a linear nor simple journey. With each step, these archetypes emerge to guide, test, and challenge you. Understanding them allows you to move forward without being trapped by illusions or detours that could delay or even sabotage your transformation. In the final part, we will consolidate everything you've learned and explore the ultimate goal of this entire process: individuation, becoming who you truly are. We've covered a lot of ground. You now understand what the shadow is and how it controls your emotions, how the persona reinforces the shadow, how to recognize shadow content in daily life, how to confront it with courage, the role of archetypes in this process. But all of this leads to one ultimate goal: individuation. Jung described individuation as the process by which a person becomes a psychological individual, that is, a separate, indivisible unity or whole. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. It is recognizing that you are not just your ego, not just your persona, not just your shadow. You are the totality of all these elements, integrated and balanced. What individuation is not? Individuation is not becoming isolated or disconnected from society, rejecting your social roles, becoming completely self-absorbed, achieving some kind of final enlightened state. What individuation is? Individuation is the ongoing process of integrating all aspects of your psyche, becoming conscious of your unconscious patterns, developing a relationship with your inner world, living authentically rather than through masks, balancing the needs of the ego with the demands of the self. Jung warned that this process is lifelong. There is no endpoint where you suddenly become individuated. Rather, it is a continuous commitment to self-awareness, self-honesty, and psychological integration. The practical benefits. When you commit to this path, tangible changes occur. Emotional stability, you are less controlled by unconscious impulses. Authentic relationships, you connect with others from your true self, not your persona. Reduced anxiety and depression. Repressed content loses its power when brought to consciousness. Creative energy, shadow material, once integrated, becomes a source of vitality. Meaning and purpose. You stop living according to external expectations and start living from your center. The ongoing commitment. But understand this clearly. Individuation requires daily practice. It is not something you learn once and then forget. It is a way of living a continuous dialogue with your unconscious. This is why I created Dialogues with the Unconscious, to give you that daily structure, those practical exercises that keep you engaged in this work. Because knowledge without practice is worthless, and practice without knowledge is blind. You need both. So here we are at the end of this complete course on mastering your shadow. You now have the foundational knowledge that took Jung a lifetime to develop and articulate. But here's the uncomfortable truth. 95% of people who watch this video will do nothing with this knowledge. They'll find it interesting, maybe even profound, but they won't apply it. And 6 months from now, they'll still be trapped in the same emotional patterns, wondering why nothing ever changes. Don't be one of those people. If you're serious about this work, if you genuinely want to transform your relationship with yourself and your emotions, then you need to take the next step. Get Dialogues with the Unconscious. 30 days of guided exercises, simple, practical, profound. This is the bridge between knowing and doing. Click the link in the pinned comment. Get your copy now and start this journey today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because your shadow isn't waiting. It's operating right now, shaping your emotions, your decisions, your life. The only question is, will you continue letting it control you from the darkness, or will you finally bring it into the light? The choice is yours. But if you're ready, truly ready, then let's do this work together. I'll see you in the next video, where we go even deeper into the practical application of Jungian psychology. Until then, remember, the unconscious made conscious is the path to freedom.